Hey everybody, I got a jam-packed show, so I'm going to try to get through this really quickly. I want to start by saying I've updated the stats on my databasebetting.com website for all the reports that I've put out really since the inception. So I've got them totaled over here. This is through May 17th, 2023. You'll notice 385 total plays, a 57.1% win rate, and a 9.01% ROI. Now, I do need to explain this a little bit. When I'm talking about games, I'm talking about every kind of bet. In other words, the over unders are in there, the money line bets are in there, the spread bets are in there, everything. So 57.1% total. Typically, when I play the money line, I play underdogs. And so that's why that ROI is possibly a little bit inflated. But I just wanted to explain how that is done. In Major League Baseball, I play, obviously, it's almost all money line. There is some mixed spread money line bets as well. But there, I do play a lot of favorites. And you kind of see that in the stats. Now, there's only 21 games because I got this report finished late last season. So I bet very few games or had very few bets last year and just haven't been putting that many reports out this year. So just 21 total plays, 13 wins. It's a 61.9% rate, only a 5.88% ROI. But here's the cool thing, the weighted ROI is 10.74%. And that's when you bet by the grade. So if you have a 5-star game, you bet 5 units, 4-star game, 4 units, and so on. In baseball, that's really, really important. Some of the other sports, not so much, but in baseball, it definitely is. Now, the second thing, and I'm very excited about this news that I wanted to say is I've created a new horse racing report. And it came about as a result of the Kentucky Derby. A friend of mine sent me the sheets, and I typically don't use the sheets. And actually, I even have an ethical dilemma with it because, they charge 25 bucks for these things. I just don't like the idea of somebody, getting the sheets and then giving to everybody under the sun. Like I sold a Kentucky Derby guide. That wasn't the intent. That you buy one Kentucky Derby guide and then everybody shares it. So I have that dilemma. So I've had people send them to me before. I've never really looked at them. I looked at them this time. And the one thing I was fascinated by, and it really gave me a good idea, is in the sheets, they give percentages as to whether a horse is likely to reach its top or run a new top or regress, all these kinds of things. Now, it looks fairly basic because a lot of the percentages are repeated, but I think it's a wonderful idea. And I thought, well, I can do this too. I've got my own database. I can look at form cycles and come up with my own report. So that's exactly what I did. And as I said, it's probably, I don't think probably, it's the best report I've ever come up with. I think it clarifies the races so well. I've used them now for, I think it's been 3 days, and it's just been amazing how clear the races become. Obviously, there's still upsets, there's still horses that you don't see, but it really does help pinpoint the competition in a relatively short period of time. And it starts with the name of the report. It's called the Race Regression Report, and that's because I used regression to come up with the contenders. And what's really cool is the factors that I evaluated and got weights for are a lot of my own factors. So it's a very unique report as well. The way I list the horses in the report, you just have the field and then all the horses listed. Horses that are highlighted in light yellow are in the top 3 in terms of regression ratings. Those all have a positive impact value. And by the way, that's the other thing I did with this report, which I haven't done with others, and I'm really glad I did, is that I looked at both the impact values and the ROI. In the past, I've been very heavily weighted towards the ROI, and I don't look that much at impact values. But I wanted to this time because I wanted to get a good idea as to probabilities and also price. Because a lot of times when a horse is peaking, and I talked a little bit about this in my Kentucky Derby video, that you can have great horses, and yes, they get bet, but that's because they're great horses. Do they offer value? No. Doesn't mean they're not going to win a lot of times. So that's what I did with this report. So the top 3 regression ratings are highlighted. This is really cool. If the name is highlighted in a dark yellow, those are horses that are profitable as a whole. And I say profitable, I think the net was like 201. So you can basically say it's break even. But I've said over and over again, when you're betting, goal number one is to reduce the takeout, whether that be by throwing out horses, finding a vulnerable favorite, whatever the case may be. So this is very, very helpful in that regard. And then there's all kinds of other ratings here. I'm not going to go through all this, but I will tell you guys that this report will be free for Preakness Day at Pimlico. I might even have it free for a week because I really would like people to try it, and then I'm probably going to sell it down the road. That's the plan anyway. Whether I do that is hard to say. I'll go briefly through some of this stuff because when we get to the Preakness handicapping, I want to tell you guys about it. So I already mentioned how the names were highlighted. You kind of see that here. This is an actual race that I bet on. This is Will Rogers Downs, second race on May 16th. And Sweet Medicine was my play. This little baby here indicates that that horse was profitable. Horses of that type are profitable. Does not mean that they're spot plays. Just because you see that dollar symbol or dollar sign does not mean that you should play the horse without looking at the race. But again, it's a good place to start. I mean, if I was looking at races and I saw one where there was a horse with a dollar sign, I'd probably look at that race. So that's the idea behind it. Then, of course, you have all the usual stuff. This is a trainer along with their current winning percentage. This is the weight change from last race. This is the style ratings. This is really cool, too. I'm going to point this out to you guys. So if you go back here, this is the surface of the race. And it's color-coded based on the projected pace. So dark red, very slow. This is a slow pace, predicted to be a slow pace, moderate, fast, so forth and so on. The same thing with the style ratings. They're rated based on the 4 furlong call as to how close they typically are. But then the color coding is based on their early speed rations, which coincides with the pace. So a great way to see if you have a slow pace race, how things are going to set up. These are the speed figures. And I explained some of this. That green figure there is very significant. And then you'll see some of them that'll be in box. That means the horse has got a dominant edge in that category. And by the way, this is last speed rating, max speed rating, and overall. And then these are the late speed rations. Once again, color-coded. The light green, good. Dark green, very, very good. Let's skip ahead here. These are the form ratings. Let's skip ahead right here. This is the form cycle. I was so excited about this, even though I don't use what I'm about to tell you guys. So, you know, I've written a lot of financial stuff. I've been in the financial world and I've dabbled with technical analysis, but I never liked the graphs. However, I know a lot of people do. And so this was my hope that maybe some people could find some things here and see certain patterns that they like and can play. I, as I typically do, looked at the numbers and came up with positive and negative form cycles, and they are also highlighted. Green is positive, gray is neutral. In some cases means I can't figure it out, and then red is negative. So a great way to see how the horse is coming into the race. And then, of course, you've got the chart as well. This is the last race and the days since that race, winning rate, class rating. All of these things are associated with impact values. And I'll talk about that on future shows. Then, of course, the comments. I want to talk briefly about the fair odds. This is that last part right there. This is based on my projected odds, and it's the morning line coupled with the regression ratings to get an idea as to fair odds. And anytime I come up with fair odds, they have to work. In other words, if I have fair odds that don't work, what's the point? So these do work within certain constraints. And that's pretty much true with everything, because if there are no restraints, well, then you just go with the fair odds, look for overlays, and you're golden. It's just not that easy. But when you have certain conditions, and I highlight those in the report, those fair odds are especially meaningful. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the Preakness Stakes. Before I get to analyzing the race, I got to talk about the garbage that happened right after the race. And that is, there are no horses, none, coming back from the Kentucky Derby other than Mage. And I know what a lot of you are going to say, and I know I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but it is total garbage. It is not doing right by the horse. It is this notion that everything has changed. And it's just simply not true. I heard Randy Moss talking about, once again, changing the Triple Crown structure. D. Wayne Lucas has talked about this. Folks, let me ask you something when you hear this stuff, because some of you, I'm sure, agree with it. Let me ask you something. When the 3-point shot was adopted in the NBA. Has that line moved in, or has it moved out to accommodate for players getting better? Just going to keep that out there. Field goals. Have we made field goals easier because the kickers are too fragile, they can't kick anymore? Or have we made them harder? Have field goal kickers in the NFL gotten better or worse? You pretty much name the sport, and we are making rules because people are bigger, stronger, and faster. In horse racing, we're doing the opposite. We're saying that these horses, despite selective breeding, are getting worse. And so much of it is based on nonsense. And that's what drives me nuts. Because I know the criticism I'm going to get. I've gotten it my entire career. Well, what do you know? Are you a trainer? No, you're not a trainer. You don't know. But I can look at the numbers. In fact, let's talk about one of them. Okay, so I queried my database as a whole. Because we've heard you can't come back in 14 days. It's too soon. So I looked at all horses that won their last race, like Mage, coming back in 2 weeks or less. A 1.46 impact value, a $1.71 ROI. For those well-rested steeds, you remember the whole tonalist California Chrome debate and how, tonalist had such an advantage because he was so rested. So for those horses, when they won their last race, a 1.27 impact value, and a $1.52 ROI. Now, granted, I could have broken this down into buckets and maybe gotten some different results. But the point is you still have a positive ROI on horses coming back quickly. And, when I've talked about statistics, a lot of you have gotten after me and said, well, that's a junk stat because of this and that and so forth. And I've always said that I really try to look at these statistics and give something that I consider meaningful. When you look at days since last race, one of the things you have to understand is when you're looking at stake races, you're probably going to find that the horses aren't racing as frequently. And so the uninformed person could just say, well, they're quality horses. They need their time off. They need to rest. It was a gut-wrenching effort. They've got to get rest. Or you could consider the fact that there just aren't as many stakes races, especially grade 1 stakes races, as there are claiming races or maiden claiming races, or whatever the case may be. The cheaper races that are run pretty much every day. And so you're going to get a natural bias in those numbers anyway. It does not mean that the horse then needs the rest. Literally every study I've done on this doesn't show that, especially when you tie in form. Because really what happens when you take a layoff is it's a reset. And again, I'm going to throw out another example that people hate. I'm going to use, working out as an example. If I worked out once every month, I could probably go in there and tear it up and feel great. How am I going to feel the next day? I want to feel like garbage. So what's the solution these days? Well, take an aspirin. Take some kind of a drug to ease that pain. And I'm not casting any aspersions here, but I think that's become a way of life for many people. And I just don't think it's conducive to good health. 84 Kentucky Derby winners have gone on to contest the Preakness. And I want to say when I got this stat, the Preakness had to come after the Derby. Some of you older fans will remember that order was very volatile for many years. I think it got locked in the 1940s. But anyway, those obviously, if the Preakness came before the Derby, I'm not, looking at the Derby and then looking back to see how they did in the Preakness. But 84 Kentucky Derby winners contested the Preakness Stakes. 37 of them won. 44% managed to race back on 2 weeks rest and win. Now, here's the interesting thing, because I was so set to bet against Mage in the Preakness Stakes. And not because I think Mage is a bad horse by any stretch of the imagination, but that was a very fast pace, and Mage took advantage of it. So you'll notice that when the Derby winners trailed by 10 lengths or more at the first call, only 33.3% came back to repeat, and there was a negative ROI, which tells you a couple things. One, it tells you just how formful the race is, because you still get 33% winners. Here's another stat. Horses that were upset winners of the Kentucky Derby, those that paid $20 or more, just 5 of 24 have come back to win in Baltimore, and the ROI also negative. Now let's talk about the proverbial new shooters in the Preakness Stakes, because everybody's looking for that horse that didn't run in Kentucky and is well rested. Take a look at the stats since 1960. 3.9% win rate. That's a 0.39 IV, meaning they win 39% of the races they should win, if that makes sense. So just 39%. And that's a $2 net of 78 cents for every $2 bet. Now, I know what a lot of you are going to say. We had a new shooter last year. We've had a lot of new shooters win recently. So I took a look at the last 10 years. Sorry, still not good. 52 total horses, 3 winners. That's a win rate of 5.8%, a 0.58 IV, and a $130 net. So better, but still not great. And by the way, that does exclude the COVID year of 2020. That year was just not, it just didn't work. So here's something else to look at, because it definitely applies to this year's Preakness. When a new shooter won an alternate race, so, they didn't compete in the Kentucky Derby, they won whatever race they did compete in before the Preakness, a 0.54 impact value, so still terrible, a 93-cent, $2 net. Again, not good figures, but a whole lot better than the others. In the money in the alternate race, a 0.4 impact value, 81 cents for a $2 bet. And I put in parentheses here the horses that qualify this year. So for the horse that won the alternate rate, Red Route 1, Perform, First Mission. The horse that was in the money, that's Blazing Sevens. He was third in the Bluegrass. The horses that finished out of the money in the alternate race, a 0.13 impact value, a 52-cent, $2 net. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of go through some of the charts that I look at. So the first thing I like to do is kind of get a summary of the race. This is my overall speed ratings, early energy, late energy, purse average. So here you see early energy is National Treasure. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. First Mission has the best LSRs. Mage, obviously, the highest purse average. He was in the Kentucky Derby. And then First Mission with overall speed. The second thing that I will do typically is run my reports. This might take a while. Okay, so this is in bet rating, or this is my bet rating report. I used to have this at databasebetting.com. And you'll notice Mage is raced first, or is rated first, and then First Mission and Red Route 1 on my class and pace report. I want to say it's the same thing. Here we have Mage, National Treasure, and First Mission. Now, the report I've been talking to you guys about is my race regression report. So that's the report I really want to focus on as I get my final Preakness picks. And I want to start by looking at the track surface here. And here we have the pace code as well. And light yellow means a moderate pace. Now, this is interesting because the pace in the Derby was very, very fast. So this is why when I showed you those other Preakness stats for Derby winners that were trailing by a lot and so forth, this is why. Because there's typically a pace reversal in the Preakness Stakes. If you had a fast pace in the Kentucky Derby, you're going to get a much slower pace in the Preakness, and vice versa. So this is the first interesting thing to note, is that we're going to have a moderate pace. I don't think that's surprising. In fact, looking at this race closer, there is really no true speed in this race. I am going to go to the past performances. We're going to talk about a few horses, and I'll show you something very interesting, but there's just not a lot of speed. You'll notice here in terms of the regression ratings, National Treasure, Mage, First Mission. That's pretty much what we saw in the other reports. These are the top 3 contenders, and I don't think it's any mystery why. Also, the trainers, the really good ones, the ones with the high win rates and so forth, are highlighted in green. Notice National Treasure with Bob Baffert. And then you've got Chad Brown. You've got Brad Cox with First Mission. In terms of style, you'll notice that Coffee with Chris is rated as a solo frontrunner. That's what the F+ stands for. The thing is, he's not that fast. And again, I'm going to show you the past performances and show you where this might be thrown a little bit up in the air. National Treasure looks like the closest presser, then First Mission, and then the others tend to do their best running from the rear half of the field. This is very interesting too. In terms of the max par speed figure, nobody has a 100. Nobody has met the race par. And that is highly unusual for the for the Preakness Stakes. So keep that in mind. Negative form cycles, we've got National Treasure, also Coffee with Chris. The others are neutral. And then the other thing I wanted to show you guys is the fair odds, which is over here. You notice First Mission as the lowest fair odds, followed by Mage, followed by National Treasure. Let's take a look at the past performances. And here's where things get interesting. National Treasure, trained by Bob Baffert. I mentioned he finished out of the money in his last race. So he's bucking a 1 for 76 trend, but I'm telling you right now, Bob Baffert is going to give it his very best. I think he wants to lead with this horse. I think that's the strategy. And I think it's a good strategy. Let me tell you why I think that. First of all, you'll notice here he's got, if I can find it, he's got the blinkers on. So they're putting blinkers on. This horse has had blinkers on twice before. Once when he ran third in a very good effort in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And then the other time in his maiden debut where he went wire to wire with a pretty good ESR at 6.5 furlongs. Now check out these works. This is typical Baffert. So he last raced on April 8th. You got to work 2 weeks later. 4 furlongs, 48. So, 5 furlongs a week later. Then he starts cracking down. A very good 6 furlong work on May 6th. And then 6 days after that, a bullet work at 4 furlongs. Like I said, when you couple that with the fact that he's putting on blinkers, I think they want the lead with National Treasure. And this is where I said you kind of have to throw the stats out. That 1 for 76, yeah, he's bucking a big trend. But A, you don't have a lot of other Derby contenders to deal with. You just have Mage. And then the pace really sets up for him because he can be on or right near the lead, and I don't think they're going to go that fast. Now, that said, I want to turn my attention to Mage because this is a horse that has tactical speed. He didn't show it in his last 2 races, but he can be closer. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say he will be closer. I think just the slower pace in general is going to get him within 5 lengths, and he could be closer than that. But I expect him to be right in that area, 3 to 5 lengths off the pace. So he's going to be in very, very good position. Like I said, normally I would be very earnestly betting against this horse, but this sets up so differently than other races that we've seen in the past. First of all, I don't think this is a great 3-year-old crop, and Mage is young and he's improving. And so I really, really like that aspect. He's definitely the fastest horse in the race. One could argue he's the classiest horse in the race. The big thing for me is going to be price. 8 to 5, the morning line odds, I think are pretty good. But if this horse is odds on, then you have to start looking at alternatives. The thing that is good about this race is I think it is 3 contenders. You guys saw the reports pretty much lined up. My own opinion lines up. This is National Treasure, it's Mage, and it's First Mission. So with that said, let's take a look at First Mission real quick. And this horse, probably in terms of ability, is the closest to Mage. He hasn't raced that much, but the racing that we've seen, the performances we've seen have been very, very good. Look at those LSRs. I already mentioned he tops the field in that. He's just very good, and he can be right off the pace. So if I'm setting up how this race is going to run, I think National Treasure goes. I think the Cheap Speed goes. I think First Mission sits right in back of them, and then I think Mage is maybe a little further off, but he could be with First Mission. So that's the way I see it going. And like I said, to me, it's those 3 horses, and it's going to come down to price. I wouldn't take odds on Mage. I think for First Mission, I want to say my report had him fair at 3 to 2. I'd be more inclined to go the morning line. I think probably 5 to 2 on him. And National Treasure, I'm going to bump down a little bit, and maybe I'll be kicking myself afterward, but I just think that Bob Baffert really wants to win this. He's good at the Preakness, not surprisingly, because he's good at bringing horses back quickly. And I think he's going to be in the best tactical position to do so. Two things weighing against him: the 1 for 76 jinx, and then you'll remember on my race regression report, bring it back up again, he has got a negative form cycle. So those two things are weighing against him. In fact, that makes me think probably 4-1 on him is fair. It's going to be a tough race, I think, to make money. Normally, the Preakness is really, really good, but this is going to be tough because of the way things set up. But I think those three horses just look for profitable combinations. I don't think an exacta box would be profitable. You might be able to key Mage in an exacta key box. That might make money. That's probably what I would wind up doing, is going that direction. But that's the way it stacks up. I wish I could be more definitive. They just don't all break out like great money makers, and this one, unfortunately, is just one of those races. But that said, I will have a free race regression report on Preakness Day. Also look for the Major League Baseball report. Those will be posted all at databasebetting.com. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you do want to. If you don't, that is fine. Thanks, and have a great betting week.